to Loot Gaming from Loot Crate. It's a monthly subscription service. The gaming crate right now is $26.95 a month. You get $60 plus of retail value goods in there. Everything's licensed. Most of this is exclusive. You never know what you're going to get because it's a mystery. Check it out at lootcrate.com. And now back to our regularly scheduled programming. We found Bob, the design director for Shadow of War. So how's things been going so far with the latest game here?
Really good. It's really fun getting people to play it and see how their weird different stories emerge.
Now we're going to play test this thing in just a second. So right now I kind of want to ask you a few questions about the technical side of the engine. What's changed in the Lithtech technology since the last game?
Yeah, so last game was the first time we were on that generation of consoles, right? Mm-hmm. So getting to focus on optimization and instead of putting it onto a new platform is big. We get to squeeze a lot more out of the engine in a lot of different ways. So we've got an overhauled lighting system, and we've got the 4K and HDR support for the high-end PC and the Xbox One X, and also just massively higher AI count this time around. So we can get those giant fortress sieges going with tons and tons of enemies and allies, whereas last time we were fairly constrained on how many could be on screen at once.
Let's talk about that. So now you can pretty much harness an army to go and fight another army. Mm-hmm. As far as the technical side of that goes, are you doing that on CPU? Or are you guys enabling this to work with more than 4 or 5 cores, or how's that working out?
It's a very complicated process where, I mean, there's so many different aspects to it, right? Like the AI has got the pathfinding, but there's also the rendering of all those animations, and there's squeezing what we can out of every part of the machine basically to pull that stuff off.
Right. Now we're going to play test this, but I'm going to ask you right now, with the new siege system and everything, how are you controlling everyone? Like, how does that function as far as the gameplay element?
Sure. Yeah. So it's still at the core, it's an action game.
Right.
You're playing as Talion Celebrimbor at the heart of it, just trying to kick ass by yourself and control that one character. At the same time, you invest all this time in building up an army and recruiting these guys and dominating them out in the sandbox somewhere. We want them to be impactful. We want it to be worth the payoff that you spent time getting them. But at the end of the day, you're still in control of Talion, running in there and just destroying the fortress with these guys at your side. So they're going to bring upgrades with them. They're going to, especially if you get into the real strategic layer and you're kind of min-maxing the strengths and weaknesses of the guys you're up against, that can make a big difference. But once you get into a giant group of enemies, you still have to be able to attack and counter and dodge and exploit these guys' weaknesses yourself too.
Now, speaking of the action game element, just overall, this game and Shadow of Mordor, where did you get the mechanics? Like, how did that come together? Was it something you guys pulled from some of the other games you made with Warner Brothers, or was it just something you put together? It's one of the most fluid combat mechanics of any game I've ever played. So, how did that really develop? And what were some of the nuances that you had to put together to make this happen?
Yeah, I mean, the combat itself, we have a bunch of extremely talented folks who were working on that system for a while. Before we even started Mordor, they were prototyping some ideas for that kind of combat system.
Right.
Obviously, Arkham was amazing and really fun, and so we took a lot of inspiration from that, but we built ours kind of from the ground up with our own spin on things, and obviously being able to decapitate people rather than have to just knock them unconscious helps for some of that satisfaction, punctuating the fights. And yeah, so we just got a bunch of really passionate folks.
Now, the violence. You mentioned decapitations. Did you have any, dialogue or any pushback from the people who own the rights? Since Lord of the Rings always has been sort of a PG-13, there's not a lot of uber violence in that. I know they're only orcs, but did you have any sort of pushback from this is a bit much?
So we run everything through Middle-earth Enterprises, and we get their feedback on everything, and we are very careful about focusing the torment on the really evil, nasty characters, and so we don't.
The ones with the funny accents,
yeah. We don't torture the humans so much. Yeah,
that's funny. All right, I guess that's fair enough. Now, how long have you been with Monolith? You've been along the ride since back in the early days?
About a little over 10 years now for me.
How long ago was another? No one lives forever.
That's before my time. I started at the beginning of Fear 2.
So Fear 2. Okay, so Lithtech. Is this the same engine that's been, added to since then?
Yeah.
How is it so smooth? I don't understand, because a lot of the engines, when you tack on stuff, it becomes just a big duct-taped mess.
We have an amazing core technology team there that has just been doing everything we need to do as we keep slowly evolving. I mean, when I got there, obviously it was a shooter studio with a bunch of shooters under their belt. But then we made a MOBA, and then we made Shadow of Mordor, and those guys have kept pace with like all the changes that they need to make to the technology. They managed to get this big open world third person action game out of a shooter engine,
right,
in a way that like it blows my mind. I'm just happy as a designer I don't have to solve problems that hard.
Well, that's the one, that was the number one question I want to ask you, because playing this game I was like, now there's no way this is the same engine. This must be like a new engine that they're still calling the Liftech engine, but it just...
Well, I mean, those guys are iterating and evolving things all the time, and our tools too, like the pipelines that our designers and artists and everybody work through have evolved so much to be capable of building something at this scale. I imagine if you were to go back and look at the first revs of this, it would look like a completely different beast, but it has been an incremental process that the guys have been layering up on.
Cool. I got 2 more questions for you, and they're more personal background stuff. So what's your favorite game of all time for the PC, and why?
Well, that's a tough one.
Bejeweled Deluxe. Everybody, you guys heard it here. The director of Shadow of War, Bejeweled Deluxe.
And the favorites are always hard questions, but I will say I've played a really unreasonable amount of League of Legends, and it has caused some of the best like team bonding moments that I've had with some of my friends. So.
Is it one of those games that it is your favorite, or you just keep coming back to it because you're like, and sometimes you're sitting there like, I'm doing this too much? Is it one of those
I've
things?
Definitely had an on again, off again relationship where I realize at some point that like I have other things I enjoy doing with my life, and I should probably devote some time to them. It has a deep pull, though.
All right, last question. Specific to this game, what's your favorite, just when you're playing the game, what's your favorite part of the game?
So for me, it's just running around the sandbox, just doing crazy stuff and watching what the Nemesis system does in response. The weird things that can just happen out of the dynamics of the systems. Like if you work on a linear game that's more story driven or something, you get real sick of seeing like reviewing a mission and seeing the same thing happen over and over in exactly the same way. Right. This kind of game, you get to just like be surprised every day working on it for years on end, which I think it's great for me day to day. And then once it comes out, then I get to watch other people react to it and post their stories and videos and stuff. That's the most fun part of it to me.
Cool. All right, I appreciate the interview.
Yeah, thank you.
Have a good one.